ministry in a COVID world. My name is Stephanie Gates Sloan, and I want to help you as you think through what does it look like for us to engage new communities with the gospel during this unique time. Welcome to part 3 of college ministry in a COVID world. And what I want us to talk about today is preparing our people to go. If we don't have a plan, what I have found is evangelism tends to just not happen. When I became the director of the BSM over 10 years ago, what I found was we really wanted to do campus outreach. So we were talking about it. We even had a few student leaders that said, we want to step in and we want to do this. But then what happened was we got it scheduled. We said, let's go. But no one other than those few students would ever show up. And so there was just that frustration of what are we doing wrong? And then I realized something. Our students understood the why they should go, but they did not understand the how. They knew that the Bible had said, you need to go take the gospel out to where you are. They even understood that they should do it on our campus, but they didn't know how. And so we pressed pause, and then we went into this time of training, which took about 2 years. And we just really wanted to make sure that they not only knew methods of how do you share the gospel, but specifically with our students, we were recognizing they needed help knowing how do I start a conversation? What kind of questions do I ask? And so we started moving into trainings that would help us with those specific things. And so my hope is that I can kind of provide just some frameworks and some practical things that just really helped us. So first, you've got to teach them how. And so how will your people share the gospel? What methods could they use? What are the needs? What are the things that are happening with your people? Like I said, with college students, most of them don't know how to get a conversation started, especially with someone they don't know, or if they're intimidated and they're afraid that the conversation could ultimately damage the relationship that they have with that person. And so we had to start to think through, how do we help them do that? We created a training. We took a training that UTA BSM had already developed and tweaked it so that it would fit our ministry context, and we called it Salty Training. And the whole premise is to help them S, start a conversation, A, ask questions, L, listen, T, tell the gospel, and then the Y stands for yes or no. And all we would have them do is ask at the end, after we've shared the gospel, what do you think about that? And so we then would train on different methods to help them know, here's how you tell someone the gospel. And so for a long time, we used something called the bridge illustration. What we use now is something called the 3 circles. I've found that it's a little bit more explanatory when it comes to different aspects of the gospel, and it's an easy picture that can be drawn out, and our students really have taken a hold of it. And so my question for you is, what method? So as leaders, not only do we have to figure out what methods we want to use, but then we have to think through what's the training going to look like. For us, we started with our leaders. We would do evangelism trainings at all of our leader retreats. We would even do them at some of our leader meetings. And then we still had it scheduled to where there was a time every week when we would do what we would call equip, and then we would go do campus outreach. And so you have to think through, what's that structure going to look like? It started off with our staff leading those trainings. And now we have students that step in and fill a lot of those roles. And so we've trained our students so that they can then go and train the students that they know that are maybe on their ministry teams or are in their connect groups, such as our small groups, so that they're able to make sure that as many of our students that are a part of the BSM know how to share the gospel. And so once we taught them how, we then had to help them think about who. Who are you going to take the gospel to? Who are you going to share it with? We have 2 different forms of evangelism that we focus on here at the BSM. The first is relational evangelism, and the second is contact evangelism. Contact is when we just go out on campus and we have conversations. Relational evangelism is any conversation that's happening with someone that we already know. And so what we want to do is to help our students specifically identify who are the people in your life that don't know Jesus, or you're not sure. And so what we do is we sit down with them and we have them draw out what we call an Oikos map. And the whole purpose of that is to help our people identify who are those in your life that don't know Jesus. And so as they're writing those names out, then we want to start to help them think through, well, what is it going to look like for you to talk to them? One thing that I have found is oftentimes you have people, when they fill it out, they literally think, I don't have anyone that doesn't know Jesus. And so in that situation, we have to be a little bit more creative, or even work with them to think through, what about people that are just in your everyday life? Their classes, or at the restaurant that you go to. And if they still can't think about it, then we encourage them to start to pray, Lord, please bring someone in that I can tell the gospel to. So once we have figured out how will they share the gospel, and then we've talked about who, we want to then think about accountability. We try to form small teams or pairs so that they can check in with one another. This is especially essential now during coronavirus, where everything just looks different. We have to make things smaller. And so we want these little groups to offer encouragement, to be praying for one another as they're going and sharing, and also just that accountability of making sure that we sit down and we say, okay, when are we going to do it? And who's going to follow up? And they're going to be praying when I go have this conversation. And to be just a reminder of the power of the Holy Spirit. It's the Spirit moving and working in someone's life. This is not up to you, but you get to be literally just a vessel that's going to deliver the gospel to them. And so that is our hope, by just forming these pairs or accountability groups for the hope of just walking alongside one another. Next, we debrief. And what I mean by this is we want to provide opportunities for those outreach stories to be shared publicly. So not only are they sharing it within their small groups, but we want to give them a chance to share that in front of the big group. So that starts off with our leadership team, and then even moves into our Thursday night worship time. When we celebrate evangelism publicly, we start to see the culture shift. And that gives us an opportunity then to create some excitement for not only our leaders sharing the gospel, but for other people to do the same. And then when you have someone who's come to know the Lord because of evangelism happening within your church, you want them to share that story as well. Next, you've debriefed. Now you've got to figure out who needs to be followed up with. At the BSM, we had to figure out what's our strategy going to be, because this is one of the things that is hardest for us to do. And so we use something that we call red light, yellow light, green light. And what that is it's literally just that. We walk our students through, okay, was that person a red light, a yellow light, or a green light? A red light is someone who's just not interested in sharing and hearing and learning more about Jesus. And so from there, we just move on. A yellow light is someone who says, I'm interested and I want to know more. And so we want to make sure that we follow up with the yellow light. And then you have a green light. A green light is someone who you've shared the gospel with and they say, yes, I believe that. We also have a category for a pre-existing Christian. So you have an opportunity, you share the gospel, you realize that this person already knows Jesus. And so what we want to do is use that time for two things. One, we want to teach them how to go and share the gospel with somebody else. So we want to teach them the 3 circles method. And we want to help them develop out their own Oikos map. Who is it that they can then go and share the gospel with? So we have to follow up. We have to then say, okay, here's a yellow light, here's a green light. Or maybe here's a pre-existing Christian that just hasn't gotten connected to a local church. And so how can we follow up with them and invite them in? This next piece is probably the most important. And that is that as the key leaders of any ministry in any church, your people have to see you going and doing evangelism. Your ministry, I've learned through all the consulting training that I've done, is going to be a reflection of you. So your weaknesses are going to be seen throughout your ministry. And so even if evangelism is just something that doesn't come natural to you, like it doesn't come natural to me, making sure that I build this into my schedule. When I started to do ministry with UNT athletes and my students saw me investing in them in such a way that not only was at the games and practices, but these students are coming to me where I'm leading a Bible study where most of them don't know Jesus. And when my staff and students started to see that, it was a lot easier then for me to get behind and to say, this is the culture, this is our hope. And when our students could see that we bought into what we were saying God has called us to, then they bought in. And here's what happens. I can't change the culture of our ministry. Only our student leaders can. And so when they started to buy in and to get excited about evangelism and outreach, that's when we started to see the culture of our ministry change. And in this weird season of living in a COVID world, we have to decentralize away from our buildings. We have to help our people understand, just as it worked in the New Testament, this is how God is working through us and with the power of the Holy Spirit today to go and to take the gospel into our world, into our communities, maybe our families, our workplace, and even our favorite place to go and hang out. So that is what the whole hope of this part 3, preparing our people to go. I hope that it has given you some practical things to think through and to strategize as you prepare for what you can do with your students, maybe in your ministry, but ultimately your whole church.